Well, it happened again. That's the least surprising thing that I could possibly tell you right now, but it happened again. I'm talking about Spain, and just me saying I'm talking about Spain, you probably know if you're up and caught up with all the shit, you probably know where we're headed. When I say we're talking about Spain, which is a shame because there's a lot of great things going on in Spain. League race, spicy, the rise of Girona, the return of Athletic Bilbao. There's so many things going on in the Liga that are fun, right, and make things interesting in the league. But we're not even actually talking about La Liga or any lower league nonsense. We're talking about one of those YouTuber games. They're an epidemic now, which is fair. Maybe I'll play in one someday. So I don't want to say anything too bad about them because it does look like it would be a good time. There was a particularly huge. Sorry, I am running after recording this today, so allow me to drink my weird fancy running drink, which of course is all just a charade to convince you that I am going to run today. Of course you and I both know I'm not going to run. I have the marathon in 3 weeks, and I'm definitely not going to run, and we just know that's exactly how this works. But yeah, they had a YouTuber game in Spain. It's a pretty cool idea, actually. And this YouTuber match was between a team from Spain and a team from France. So basically, you get your YouTubers together from France, you get your YouTubers together from Spain, you put them in a stadium, and I think it's Atletico Madrid is where they decided to play the match, right? And they sold 70,000 tickets for this match, and it was going to be a big deal. But unfortunately, during this match, there was an incident of racism in the stands directed towards the French team. Right now, there's a lot of different articles about this. I'm just on the one from Talk Sport, basically. But the game was suspended for 17 minutes, actually. There's a 17-minute delay. To my surprise, they actually came out and they ended up finishing the game, but there was a significant delay because of audible and visible racist behavior aimed at the players. Basically, what happened was people in the stands were aiming a monkey gesture at a French player named Box. Which, if you ask so the people that defend this sort of stuff, I'm sure Box was asking for it. Maybe he was antagonizing the crowd or doing this or doing that, or maybe Box was just being a jerk. Maybe he was being too uppity. Maybe he was just being too uppity, and that's why, you had to make the monkey gesture at him to try and calm him down. Of course, as you and I and probably everybody else knows, every single one of those arguments are bullshit. Anytime you see an argument like that, in person, online, call it out. That's the only way that change is going to happen. Anybody that is able to rationalize any sort of argument like that is an idiot or is willfully ignorant. What I mean by willfully ignorant is somebody that is like taking proactive steps to try to not learn about the actual situation, right? And because it keeps happening, I keep having to have this same conversation, right? I can't, it keeps getting drudged up again and again, this sort of instance. But there's layers to this particular happening, because then there are black players on the Spanish team too. There's this YouTuber named Coco who you can see in this picture right here, and he gets involved with the crowd at this particular match. He gets involved with the crowd. He's telling him to stop. There's audible and visible racist gestures being made towards not only the players on the French team, but now towards Coco on the Spanish team. And this became such a problem that Coco, actually, the Spanish influencer, walked away from this encounter in tears, right? Like feeling that kind of animosity, feeling that kind of overt racism. He walked away like visibly shaken and in tears. All of this goes down. The French players leave the field. They are eventually convinced all to come back out. The referee had to grab the microphone to say that the match was going to be, they were going to end the match if the fans didn't stop doing what they were doing. And eventually everybody comes back out on the field and Spain wins the game 2-0. This is the latest, greatest sign that Spain has a significant problem with racism, particularly around football. there is a part of it that is fueled by the internet and having conversations like this where people think it's cool to try and like poke and prod and bother people, and they just don't understand the difference between football banter and being a racist. Like that is there is a huge cognitive disconnect. And maybe this particular story can help with that, because this is not the end of this story. The reason that I find this particularly interesting. Now, this sort of thing should always be particularly interesting because you should always call this stuff out. But this one is particularly interesting because Coco, the Spanish YouTuber that jumped in to try and stop what was happening and try to protect the black players on the French national team, he actually had some pretty hot takes about this situation when it revolved around Vinicius. Now, they have the entire quote here. Somebody pulled it on Reddit, fortunately. And it's in Spanish, so I'm going to read you the translated version. What he said around the racism issue around Vinicius was, this was talking about Vinicius doing the Black Power salute against Valencia fans, because Vinicius v. Valencia has been one of the key flashpoints to the racism issue in Spain writ large. He said, it's an embarrassment for all black people struggling. Vinny is using racism as an excuse to hide what an asshole he is. Now, this obviously sums up a lot of the feeling of the people that are in the camp that being racist towards Vinicius is okay, right? Because just go read the comments of, anytime I make a video about like the latest, greatest racism scandal that usually has to do with Vinicius, and there's a lot of people pointing out that they think he's an asshole, he's a flopper, that he antagonizes the crowd, right? To which my response has always been, just because you're a dick doesn't mean somebody gets to be racist to you. That is not like the natural human response in that situation, right? You should never be degrading somebody based off of the color of their skin. It's just not something that we should be okay with in the world. That being said, there is a great quote from, I think it's Teddy Roosevelt. It's not a quote, it's more of like a poem, or I don't want to say a short story, but an excerpt. It's called The Man in the Arena. Now, it's longer than this, but this weird thing that you can buy for $5.99 actually has a quote that is pulled off that I like. And here it is, word for word. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end of the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I've always loved this. I've always loved this excerpt from this, I think it was a speech, upon further investigation. Because what it taps into is you really can't judge the core of somebody when they're trying to go out and achieve something if you have not gone out and tried to achieve that thing yourself. And I think this is a fabulous example because I structured, normally there is zero structure to a Zealandism. I sit down, I turn the camera on, I talk about whatever I want to talk about, whatever I find interesting or important that particular day. I structured this specifically for a reason, so that I wasn't setting this up as some way to attack Coco for not understanding what Vinicius was going through, right? Where Coco ends up in a situation where an entire section of a stadium of people are racially abusing him. This is not a situation he's ever been in before. This is different than hate comments that you get on the internet, which I'm sure he has to deal with because if you've opened the internet lately, especially if you are a Spanish black YouTuber, I am sure that is something that has become a fact of life for him. It is different when you are on the field playing a match under pressure and then that sort of thing is going on to you en masse, being directed at you. Right, that is a different feeling. It is a feeling that I cannot relate to. It is a feeling that everybody else that is passing judgment on this situation, whether it be around Vinicius or Coco, cannot relate to. But now Coco can relate to, right? Vinny is using racism as an excuse to hide what an asshole he is. Well, Coco was then subjected to a similar kind of experience, an experience that, mind you, was on a much lower level than what Vinicius has had to deal with over the same amount of time. right? And I always take great pains to explain that when we are talking about these footballers, when we're talking about Mihailo Mudryk, right, or Antony, or Timo Werner, or Kai Havertz, and in the way the different ways that they're responding to getting cooked and put under pressure and having people say that they're terrible or that they can't do anything, right? It is impossible to imagine the type of toll that can take on a person. On our podcast that I do with Julian Gressel, we interviewed Tim Ream, and he would talk about, and Tim Ream is nowhere near the level of those guys in terms of the spotlight that he's been under at any point in his career. But Tim Ream, at certain points, a man I would consider a real hard scrabble, tough nose, kind of, center back, an American player in England, said that at some points, the amount of pressure that you were subjected to while being in that arena, it would make you want to give up. And one of the hardest things he ever had to do in his career was not give up in those moments where everything seems to be against you, where you can't even bring your own kids to games because they're going to figure out they're Tim Ream's kids and start going after them, right? The amount of pressure, then the amount of eyeballs and the amount of feedback that professional footballers get is like, the human brain is not designed to handle it. The human brain is not designed to handle any of it. And so I always give them a little bit more leeway when we're talking about these stories, because the amount of stuff that they have to deal with, as per this quote, I can't relate to. I can't understand. I don't know what it's like to have that amount of eyeballs and that amount of pressure on me. But Coco is a very valuable lesson for all of us here. And hopefully, he'll come out of this with a real change of his opinion that no matter how much of an asshole you think somebody is, or, Vinny very well might be an asshole, there is just a marked difference from everybody that you talk to and every experience that you've ever seen. There is a marked difference in being racist towards somebody and football banter. There is a huge difference between saying, fuck you, and making monkey gestures at somebody because they are black. And it is something that I, and probably you, hopefully you, cannot relate to. But if you ever need an example that how you view something from the outside can change significantly once it happens to you, once it's involving you. Everybody else's problems aren't your problem until they become yours. He thought Vinny was faking it. Now you know how it feels, right? But Coco shouldn't have to know how it feels. Nobody should have to know how this feels. But this shows you how it looks one way on the outside can feel completely different when you're that guy. You're the guy on the field that is the lightning rod put under pressure. But yeah, YouTuber football match in Spain, latest greatest example that, racism around football in Spain is just kind of a normal. Like, honestly, are you that surprised I made this video? Are you that surprised this happened? That's a problem, right?